I live in Webster Springs, West Virginia. If you're not from around here, that probably means nothing to you, but it's a small town in Webster County, maybe 700 people, tucked into the mountains along the Elk River. Everybody knows everybody, or at least everybody's truck. I grew up 2 hours from here in Elkins, but I moved to Webster Springs in 2019 for a job at the hospital in Webster Springs. I'm an LPN. I work nights at Webster County Memorial. My husband at the time, Cody, worked for the Division of Highways. We bought a little place out on Back Fork Road about 6 miles outside of town because it was cheap and it was quiet, and Cody liked to hunt and the land backed up to state forest. I want to say up front that Cody and I aren't together anymore. Not because of what happened, or not only because of that, but I think what happened in that house is part of why we didn't make it. I don't like to blame a place for a marriage falling apart, but I also don't not blame it. I'm getting ahead of myself. The house was a single-story ranch, built sometime in the 70s. White aluminum siding, gone kind of yellow, sitting maybe 40 yards off the road with a gravel driveway and a carport. Behind it, there was nothing but woods for miles. No houses, no lights, just the tree line and then the mountain going up. Our nearest neighbor, a man named Dale Persinger, was almost a mile down the road, and even he wasn't really visible from our place because of how the land curved. I remember the real estate agent, a heavyset woman named Sherry, who'd lived in the county her whole life, telling us, "You'll never hear another soul out here," like that was the selling point. And it was. That's exactly why we bought it. This was the fall of 2023. I was working 3 12-hour night shifts a week, usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Cody worked days, so our schedules barely overlapped. I'd get home around 7:20, 7:30 in the morning. He'd already be gone or just leaving, and we'd pass each other like ships, as my mom used to say. I'd sleep through the day, get up around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. We'd have a few hours together in the evening, and then I'd head back in. It wasn't a great way to live, but it paid the bills. The first thing I noticed, and at the time I really did just brush it off, was in late September. I got home from my shift around 7:25 on a Wednesday morning. It was already getting cold, that kind of Appalachian fall cold where the fog sits down in the hollow until almost 9 a.m. I pulled into the driveway and there were fresh tire tracks in the gravel that weren't Cody's truck. Wider tread, and they came up the driveway and then backed out. You could see where they'd turned around near the carport. I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe it was somebody turning around, a hunter, somebody lost. Back Fork Road doesn't really go anywhere except further up into the woods and eventually a gated logging road, so people do sometimes come up it by mistake and have to turn around in somebody's driveway. I mentioned it to Cody that evening, and he said probably UPS or the propane guy. And honestly, that made sense, so I let it go. The second thing happened about 2 weeks later, second week of October. I came home around 7:30 again. I want to say it was a Thursday, and the storm door was open. Not the main door, just the aluminum storm door, standing wide open, banging a little in the wind. I remembered closing it when I left for my shift the night before, because I always did. It was just a habit. You close doors around here because of the wind coming down off the mountain. Cody said he must have forgot to shut it when he left for work. I didn't push it, but I remember standing in the driveway looking at that door swinging back and forth on its hinge, just a little tap, tap, tap against the frame, and feeling something I couldn't really name. Not scared exactly, just off. Like when you walk into a room and you can't say why, but somebody was just in there. Late October, things started getting stranger, and this is where I stopped being able to explain things away. I got home on a Tuesday morning, October 24th. I remember the date because it was 2 days before my sister's birthday, and I'd been thinking about what to get her the whole drive home. It was maybe 7:15, still pretty dark, that gray pre-dawn dark you get in the mountains in October. I pulled in and the porch light was off. We always left it on. Cody would have turned it off if he left before daylight, so again, explainable. I went inside, and the house was cold, colder than it should have been, and I remember thinking the furnace must not have kicked on. I went to let our dog, a blue heeler mix named Biscuit, out of her kennel in the mudroom, and she wouldn't come out. She was pressed into the back corner of the kennel, just staring at me, not wagging, not barking, just staring past me down the hallway. I've had dogs my whole life. That is not normal dog behavior. I actually knelt down and looked down the hallway myself because she was so fixated on it, and there was nothing there. Just the hallway, the bathroom door open a crack the way it always was. Our bedroom door closed the way I always left it before a shift. I told myself she'd poon or something outside. I got her out eventually, coaxed her with a treat, and she bolted past me out the back door like she couldn't get out of the house fast enough. I didn't sleep well that day. I kept waking up around 11, then again around 1, thinking I heard something, but our house made a lot of noise, old baseboard heating ticking, the wind getting up in the trees, so I told myself that's all it was. The thing that actually scared me, the first real fear, happened November 2nd. I remember because it was the day after Halloween, and we'd had exactly 0 trick-or-treaters, obviously, since we lived 6 miles out with no other houses around. But I'd still bought a bag of candy out of habit, and it was sitting on the kitchen counter. I got home around 7:20 that morning. Cody's truck was gone already. I came in through the carport door into the kitchen, and the bag of candy was dumped out on the counter. Not spilled, dumped, like somebody had turned it upside down and shaken it, and then arranged some of it. 8 or 9 pieces were lined up in a straight row along the edge of the counter, alternating 1 fun-sized Snickers, 1 Kit Kat, 1 Snickers, 1 Kit Kat. Like that, real neat, real deliberate. The rest of the candy was just scattered loose around them. I stood there for I don't know how long just looking at it. My first thought, honestly, was that Cody had done it. Some weird joke. Maybe he'd had a few beers with his buddy Randy the night before, and this was the result. I texted him a picture. He didn't answer right away because he was working. He does road work, DOH, so he doesn't always have his phone on him. I put the candy back in the bag. I didn't eat breakfast. I sat on the couch with Biscuit and just kind of watched the front window until I got tired enough to fall asleep on the couch instead of in the bedroom, which I'd never done before in that house. Cody texted back around 11. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. He hadn't touched the candy. I want to be honest and say that I did consider for about a day whether I was losing it. I work nights, I don't sleep great, and I know sleep deprivation can make you see things or misremember things. I actually looked it up: night shift psychosis, sleep deprivation hallucinations, all of that. But the candy was a physical thing. It was still lined up like that when Cody got home that evening and saw it himself before I put it away. So it wasn't in my head. We didn't call the police. I want to explain why, because people always ask why not, and the honest answer is that in a county like ours, the sheriff's department covers something like 550 square miles with maybe 6 deputies on rotation, and somebody rearranged my Halloween candy is not the kind of call that gets a fast response, or maybe any response. Cody said we should just start locking up better, and we did. We started locking the carport door, which we'd genuinely never done before because who was going to walk 6 miles down Back Fork Road to break in? For about 10 days after that, nothing happened. I started to relax a little. I remember telling my sister on the phone that it had probably been some teenager messing around, bored kid from town who'd hiked back through the woods, which in hindsight doesn't even make sense given how far out we were, but I wanted an explanation bad enough that I took a bad one. Then on November 14th, a Tuesday, I came home around 7:30 in the morning and the porch light was on, which was normal. Cody leaves it on for me. But there was a folding chair set up on the porch, one of those cheap aluminum and webbing lawn chairs, the kind everybody around here has stacked in a shed somewhere. It wasn't ours. Ours were green and this one was blue and white striped, and it was positioned facing the driveway, angled like somebody had been sitting in it watching the road, watching for me to come home. I did not go inside first. I sat in my car in the driveway with the doors locked for probably 15 minutes, just looking at that chair, before I called Cody. He was already at work, out on a road crew somewhere near Camden on Golly, and it took him almost 40 minutes to get back to me because he had to finish out something with the crew before he could leave. I sat in that car the whole time. I remember it was cold enough that my breath was fogging the windshield, and at some point I had to run the engine for heat, and I kept my eyes on that chair the entire time like it was going to move if I looked away. Cody got home, went inside first, checked every room, checked closets, checked under the bed, checked the crawl space access in the hallway closet. Nothing. No sign of forced entry, nothing missing, nothing else disturbed. Just the chair. He wanted to call it in this time, and he did, and a deputy actually came out. Young guy, I don't remember his name, but he was polite and thorough for what it was. He walked the property, looked at the chair, dusted it for prints, even though he told us honestly that outdoor furniture rarely holds a usable print, especially in the damp. Nothing came back. He asked if we had any enemies, any ex-boyfriends of mine, any disputes with neighbors. We didn't. Not really. Dale Persinger down the road was elderly and kept to himself. There'd been nobody. The deputy suggested a trail camera, which felt almost insulting in how small a suggestion it was for how scared I'd become, but we did it. Cody ordered one that night, a cheap Wild Game Innovations camera, and had it up by the end of the week, mounted on a tree at the edge of the driveway pointed at the carport and front walk. For 11 days it caught nothing but biscuit, a couple deer, once a black bear moving through around 4 a.m. That scared us both pretty good when we saw it on the app. Then on the night of November 28th, I remember it was the Tuesday after Thanksgiving and I was working my shift. Cody was home alone. He texted me around 2:13 a.m. and I still have the message. I never deleted it. It said, "Biscuit's going crazy. Back door. Prob nothing. Love you." I texted back and asked if he wanted me to leave work, and he said no, said he'd checked, said it was fine. He called me at 4:47 that morning. His voice was, he said he'd gotten up around 3 after Biscuit finally settled down to get a glass of water. And while he was in the kitchen, he saw the porch light flick off, then on, then off again, 3 times, slow, like someone was doing it on purpose from outside. Except the switch was inside, by the front door, and he could see the switch from the kitchen, and nobody was touching it. He said he grabbed the shotgun we kept in the bedroom closet and went out onto the porch, and there was nobody there, nothing, just the empty driveway and the dark and the trees. But he said the folding chair, the same blue and white one from 3 weeks before, which we'd kept, stupidly, propped against the side of the shed, was sitting in the middle of the driveway, upright, like it had been carried there and set down. We checked the trail cam morning. This is the part I still can't explain, and it's the part that ended up changing something in both of us. The camera had motion-triggered clips from 3:02 a.m., 3:04 a.m., and 3:09 a.m. All 3 clips showed nothing. Empty driveway, empty walk, just grainy black and white infrared footage of stillness, maybe a moth near the lens. But the camera's internal log, the little timestamp record in the app, showed the device had also recorded a 4th clip at 3:06 a.m. that didn't exist in the file storage. It was logged as captured, but the file itself was corrupted. 0 bytes, nothing to play. Cody spent 2 hours on the phone with the camera company's support line. They told him that sometimes happens with cheap SD cards. Write errors, nothing sinister. Could be a coincidence of timing with the bear sighting a few weeks earlier degrading the card. Maybe that's exactly what it was. I've turned that explanation over in my head 100 times since, trying to make it sit right. And it mostly does. Mostly. We put the house up for sale in January of 2024. It didn't sell fast. Nothing sells fast out there. But by that spring, we were living in a rental in town, closer to the hospital, with actual neighbors on both sides and streetlights. Nothing else happened after we left. No more candy, no more chairs, no more lights. Cody and I split up about a year after that, for reasons that were mostly ordinary marriage reasons. Nothing dramatic, but I do think something about that fall changed the way we were with. We stopped being able to be alone in a quiet house without one of us getting up to check a window. I still live in Webster Springs. I still work nights. I drive past the turnoff for Back Fork Road sometimes on my way to a different friend's house, and I've noticed, and this is the detail that still bothers me, the one I never got an answer for, that the house sold in the summer of 2024 to a family with 2 little kids, and within about 8 months, it was for sale again. I don't know why. I never asked. I've thought about knocking on the door and asking the new owners if anything strange ever happened to them, but I haven't been able to make myself turn onto that road. I still don't know who set that chair down, or how the light switched at a house with nobody touching it, or why Biscuit wouldn't come out of her kennel that morning in October. I've read since then that people sometimes get fixated on the idea of somebody watching them, that it's a known thing, a kind of anxious spiral, and I've wondered if that's what happened to us, if we scared each other into seeing things that weren't there. But the chair was real. The deputy saw the chair, and nobody ever explained how it got from the shed to the middle of the driveway at 3 in the morning while my husband stood on the porch with a shotgun and nothing moved in the trees. Story 2. The night shift at the Pilot in Wytheville. I need to start by saying I don't live in Appalachia anymore. I moved away from Wytheville, Virginia in 2025, and I don't think I'm going back, not because of my family or my job, but because of what happened during the 11 months I worked the overnight shift at the Pilot Travel Center off I-81, exit 73, out past the Food City on East Main Street. If you've ever driven I-81 through Southwest Virginia, you've probably stopped there. It's one of those big truck stops. Rows of diesel pumps, a subway inside, showers for truckers, the whole thing lit up orange and white so it looks like a spaceship landed off the interstate in the middle of all that dark mountain country. I was 26 at the time, working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, mostly by myself except for one other employee, usually a guy named Terrence who worked the grill in the little subway station, though he'd leave around 1 a.m. once the last order came through. After that, it was just me at the register, alone, for 6 hours, with maybe a dozen truckers coming in and out through the night, plus whoever pulled off the highway needing gas or coffee or a bathroom. I'd taken the job after dropping out of community college in Abingdon. I was trying to save up to move to Roanoke, get my life sorted out, and the overnight differential paid almost $4 more an hour than day shift, so I told myself I could handle it. For the first few months, honestly, it was boring more than anything. I got used to the rhythm of it. Truckers are mostly polite, mostly tired, mostly just want their Marlboros and a coffee and to get back on the road. I got to know a few regulars. There was a guy named Wendell who drove for a produce company and always got the same thing, a large black coffee and a bag of sunflower seeds, and we'd talk for a few minutes about nothing, the weather, his grandkids in Bristol. I liked the quiet of it in a strange way, the hum of the coolers, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, the sound of trucks idling out in the lot all night like some kind of slow mechanical breathing you got used to. Things started changing in March of 2024. There was a man who came in a few times over about 2 weeks, always around 2 or 2:30 in the morning, always on foot. I never once saw a car or truck that I could connect to him, which was strange in itself because nobody walks up to a pilot off the interstate. There's nothing around it but frontage road and woods and the on-ramp. He was maybe mid-40s, thin, wearing a canvas jacket that looked too warm for the weather even in March, and he always bought the same thing, a bottle of orange Gatorade and a pack of AA batteries. He never said much. "Just this," he'd say, and slide the items across the counter and pay in exact cash, always exact like he'd counted it out beforehand. The first 2 times, I didn't think anything of it beyond. That's a little odd. Truck stops get odd people at 2 a.m. That's just the nature of the place. But the third time, which I want to say was around March 19th, he stood at the counter after I rang him up and just looked at me. Not said anything, just looked, for maybe 5 seconds too long, and then said, "You're here every night." Not a question. I said something like, "Yeah, I work the overnight," and he nodded slowly and said, "I know," and walked out. I remember standing there after he left with this crawling feeling up the back of my neck, the kind where you suddenly become very aware of how alone you are. I looked out the big front windows at the pumps and the lot, and I couldn't see him anywhere. No walking figure, nothing, even though I'd only looked away for maybe 10 seconds while I closed out the register. That bothered me more than anything he'd said. The lot was well lit and mostly flat for a good couple hundred yards toward the road. There was nowhere close by to just disappear to. I told my manager, a woman named Deborah, who did the scheduling, and she said she'd keep an eye on the cameras, but that unless he did something, there wasn't much to do. I understood that. It's a public store. People are allowed to be strange in public stores. I started parking my car closer to the door after that instead of out by the employee spots near the dumpsters, which Deborah didn't love, but didn't stop me from doing either. He came back on April 2nd, same time, roughly 2:15 a.m., same order, Gatorade and AA batteries. This time when I rang him up, he said, "You changed your hair," which was true. I'd gotten about 4 inches cut off about a week before. Nothing dramatic, but true, and also something a stranger who bought batteries from me twice wouldn't normally notice or comment on. I didn't say anything back, just gave him his total, and he paid and left. Same as before, and again I lost track of him almost instantly once he was out the door. I want to explain something about the store's layout, because it matters for what happened later. The pilot has big windows across the whole front, floor to maybe 8 feet up, so from the register you can see almost the entire lot, all the pumps and the frontage road beyond it. There's also a side door near the restrooms and the trucker lounge that leads out toward the diesel pumps on the far side, which truckers use more than the front door. My theory, which I clung to for a while, was that he must be parking a car somewhere on that far side, out of my sight line, and using the side door. That would explain how he seemed to appear and disappear. I never confirmed it, but it made enough sense that I could sleep, or try to sleep since I was sleeping days by then, which never quite works right no matter how long you do it. Late April, it moved past odd customer territory for me. I was on shift the night of April 26th, a Friday, around 3 a.m. Quiet, no truckers in, just me restocking the coffee counter, and my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I'd gotten a text from an unknown number. It said, "Blue jacket looks better than the jean one." I was wearing a blue zip-up that night, a Carhartt one my dad had given me for Christmas. I hadn't posted anything about it anywhere, hadn't told anyone what I was wearing that day. I stood there behind the register just staring at my phone, and then I looked up at the windows, out at the lot, and for a second, and I want to be honest that this could have been a trick of the fluorescent glare against the dark glass, because I've gone back and forth on this more than anything else in the whole story. I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the lot, near the propane cage by the ice machines, just standing, not moving. When I blinked or looked again, there wasn't anyone there. I called Deborah even though it was the middle of the night. She didn't answer. I called the non-emergency line for the Wythe County Sheriff's Office, and a deputy actually did come out, which surprised me a little, given how the police response had gone with things I'd heard about from friends in more rural counties. He walked the lot with a flashlight, checked around the ice machines and the dumpster enclosure, found nothing. No footprints he could point to on the asphalt, obviously, since asphalt doesn't hold prints. He took a report, took a screenshot of the text, said the number came back as a prepaid, untraceable burner, which didn't shock him. He said he'd have a patrol car swing through more regularly for a while. I don't know if that actually happened, but for the next week or so at least, nothing. May 9th, a Thursday, is the night I think about the most. I was alone in the store. It was maybe 1:40 a.m. Terrence had already left. There'd been a lull, no customers for almost 40 minutes, unusual even for a weeknight, which in hindsight I think about, usually there's at least somebody, a trucker running his engine at the pumps even if he's not coming in. That night, the lot was completely still. No trucks, no cars, just the orange lights buzzing over empty asphalt and the sound of the drink coolers cycling on and off behind me. At 1:47, according to the store's register log, which I checked afterward with Deborah, the front door chime went off, but there was nobody there. I remember looking up immediately, because the chime is loud, a real electronic bing-bong, and the door was standing open about 6 inches, swinging very slightly, and nobody was in the doorway or the vestibule area. I called out, "Hello?" like an idiot, because what else do you do? Nothing answered. I walked around the counter, and this is the part I still have trouble explaining calmly, and as I got close to the door, I smelled cigarette smoke, strong, fresh, like someone had just put one out right there, even though I don't smoke, and neither did Terrence, and smoking wasn't allowed within, I think, 50 feet of the entrance per the signage. I pushed the door shut, locked the employee access deadbolt we weren't technically supposed to engage during operating hours because it was a 24-hour store, called Deborah again, got no answer again, and then just stood there behind the register with the pepper spray from my purse in my hand until Terrence came in for his early shift around 5. I told Deborah everything the next day, in person this time, at the store during a shift change. She was more concerned than she'd been before. I think the cigarette smell got to her, honestly, more than the text message had, because it was such a physical, undeniable detail, not something that could be explained by glare on a window or an unlucky coincidence. She pulled the camera footage from the front entrance for that window, 1:45 to 1:50 a.m. The footage showed the door opening on its own. No visible push, no visible hand, nothing. Swinging inward about 6 inches, holding, then swinging shut about 90 seconds later, same slow arc, like it had been opened and then let go, or like wind, except there was no wind that night. I remember it being dead still outside. And also the door was a heavy commercial glass door that did not move like that on its own. I'd fought that door in actual windstorms, and it barely budged. Nothing else in the frame moved. No shadow crossed. No. Deborah watched it twice, then a third time, and I remember her saying, quietly, "That door doesn't do that," which was somehow worse than if she tried to explain it away. I quit 2 weeks later, at the end of May 2024. I told Deborah it was because I'd finally saved up enough to move, which was half true. I did move to Roanoke that July. But the real reason was that I could not make myself walk back into that store after dark again. I switched my last 2 weeks to day shift, which Deborah allowed without much argument. I think because she understood, even if neither of us said it outright. The batteries and Gatorade man never came back after the door incident, as far as I know, though I wasn't working nights anymore to see it either way. I never got another text from that number. I looked up the address of that pilot a few times after I moved, just out of some compulsive need to know, checking if anything had happened there, any news stories, any other complaints, but I never found anything else connected to it. For all I know, it was completely unremarkable to everyone else who ever worked there before or since. The detail that still bothers me, the one I never resolved, isn't the door, and it isn't even the text message. It's something small that I almost left out of this story, because it seems so minor next to everything else. About a week before I quit, I was doing inventory in the stockroom in the back, and I found, tucked behind a case of orange Gatorade on the bottom shelf, a torn-off piece of a pilot receipt with handwriting on the back. Not printed, handwritten, in pencil, just a string of numbers that looked like they might be a phone number, no name, no note, nothing else. I never called it. I threw it away almost immediately, out of some instinct I still don't fully understand, and I've regretted it every time I've thought back on all of this since, because I have no idea if it would have told me anything at all, or if it was completely unrelated, and I built it into something it never was. I just know I found it hidden behind the exact product that man always bought, in a stockroom that only employees were supposed to have access to, and I've never been able to make that detail make sense in any version of this story where it was all nothing. Story 3, till off Highway 32, Gatlinburg. I want to start by saying I know how this is going to sound, because Gatlinburg, Tennessee is a tourist town, and cabin rentals in the Smokies have a whole reputation online for ghost stories that are mostly just marketing for the rental company. This isn't that. This happened to me and my best friend Marissa in October of 2025, in a real cabin we booked through a normal listing site off Highway 321 near the Greenbrier entrance to the national park, maybe 15 minutes outside downtown Gatlinburg proper. I'm not going to give the exact cabin name because the property still operates, and I don't want to cause the owners trouble over something I can't prove. But everything else here is exactly how I remember it. I'm 29, I live in Knoxville, and I work as a dental hygienist. Marissa and I have been friends since middle school, and every October we try to do some kind of trip together, just the two of us, before the holidays get busy. In 2025, we decided on the Smokies because it's close. The leaves change beautifully that time of year, and neither of us had done a proper cabin trip before, always hotels. We found a listing for a 2-bedroom cabin, wood-sided, up a gravel drive off the main road, secluded but not too far off the beaten path, maybe a 5-minute drive to the nearest gas station. The listing photos showed a hot tub on the back deck, a stone fireplace, mountain views. We booked it for 4 nights, Thursday to Monday, the week of October 13th. The drive up to the cabin itself should have been my first read on the place, honestly, looking back. The gravel road wound up through thick trees for almost half a mile past the turnoff from 321, steep enough that Marissa's Honda CR-V struggled a little in a couple spots, and there were no other cabins visible along the way, even though the listing mentioned nearby cabins as part of the whole rental community. When we finally pulled up, the cabin looked exactly like the photos, which was a relief. I'd half expected some bait and switch. 2 stories, dark wood siding, a wraparound porch, and it did look genuinely beautiful with the fall color coming in on the ridges behind it. We got there around 4 in the afternoon on the Thursday. The lockbox code worked fine. We let ourselves in, and the inside was nice too, exactly as advertised. Open living area with vaulted ceilings, a kitchen with granite counters, 2 bedrooms upstairs. We spent that first evening completely normally. We drove into town for dinner at a barbecue place on the Parkway, came back around 9, sat in the hot tub for a while even though it was chilly, and went to bed. Nothing happened. I want to be clear about that because I think it's important to the shape of the story. The first night was completely fine, and that made everything after it harder to write off. Friday we did the touristy things, drove through Cades Cove, did a short hike near the Chimney Tops trailhead area, had dinner in Pigeon Forge. We got back to the cabin around 9:30 that night, tired in a good way, and that's when the first strange thing happened, though at the time, neither of us thought much of it. There was a light on in the cabin that we hadn't left on. Specifically, the light in the second bedroom, the one neither of us was using, since we'd both taken the master with the 2 queens because it had the better view, was on, visible from outside as we came. Marissa said maybe the property manager had come by to check on something. I said maybe it was on a timer. We went in, turned it off, didn't think more about it. Saturday morning had been changed. We'd set it to 68 before bed, and it read 74 when we came downstairs, and neither of us had touched it in the night as far as either of us could remember. Marissa joked that I must have bumped it walking to the bathroom, and I probably had, in fairness, so I let that one go too. Around noon that day, we drove into Gatlinburg for the aquarium and to walk around the main strip, had a late lunch, and got back to the cabin around 6 p.m. to get ready to go back out for dinner. This is where things started actually scaring me, not just striking me as odd. When we walked in, there was a smell in the cabin that hadn't been there before. A heavy, sweet smell, almost like air freshener, but stronger, cloying, the kind of smell that gives you a slight headache if you're in it too long. Neither of us had brought any air fresheners or candles. We checked the bathroom, checked under the sinks, couldn't find a source. Marissa, who's more practical than I am about these things, figured maybe the cleaning service had come by between guests and used something strong, even though we were mid-stay, not between check-ins, which didn't quite make sense but felt like the most reasonable explanation available. We went out for dinner around 7, came back around 9:30, and the smell was gone completely, no trace of it, which in some ways bothered me more than if it had lingered, because a real smell from a real product doesn't usually clear out of a closed house that fast. Around 11 that night, we were both in the living room, Marissa on her phone, me half watching some show on the cabin's smart TV, when we both heard footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate, crossing from what would have been above the second bedroom toward the top of the stairs. We looked at each other. I remember Marissa's face. I don't think I'd ever seen her look actually scared before, not like that. And we both just froze for a second. Then Marissa, in a whisper, said, "Is somebody up there?" I don't know what made either of us brave enough to go check instead of just leaving, but we did, together, both of us holding our phones with the flashlights on, even though the lights worked fine, walking up that staircase about as slow as I've ever walked anywhere. The second bedroom door was open. We'd left it closed, both of us were sure of that. We'd been keeping it closed the whole trip since we weren't using it. Inside, everything looked normal. Made bed, empty closet, nothing disturbed. The window was closed and locked. We checked the closet, checked under the bed, checked the little ensuite bathroom. Nothing. We didn't sleep well that night. We ended up both sleeping in the same queen bed in the master, door locked, and I remember lying there listening to every single sound the cabin made, every settling creak, telling myself it was just an old wood house cooling down for the night. Sunday morning, we talked seriously about leaving early. We even looked up if we're cutting the trip short, texted the property manager through the rental app asking, honestly, if anyone else had access to the cabin, a cleaning crew, a maintenance person, anything that could explain the light, the thermostat, the smell. The manager, a guy named Chip, responded within about 20 minutes, said no one else had cabin access during an active stay, no cleaners scheduled midweek, nothing. He asked if everything was okay, said he could send someone to check the property if we wanted. We said we were fine, which wasn't really true, but neither of us wanted to be the one to say let's just go home and eat the cost of 2 more nights. We decided to stay, but we spent Sunday out of the cabin as much as possible, did the whole day in town, ate dinner late, delayed going back until almost 10 p.m. Both of us a little drunk off 2 glasses of wine at dinner that we probably needed more than we usually would. When we got back, sun was off. We'd left it on. We were both sure of it. We'd made a point of it the last 2 nights specifically because of everything that had already happened. We sat in the car in the driveway for a few minutes, same as I imagine anyone would, working up the nerve to go in, and I remember Marissa saying, "This is so stupid, it's probably just a bad bulb," in a voice that didn't sound like she believed it. We went in together, turned on every light downstairs, checked every room including the second bedroom, found nothing out of place. We got ready for bed around midnight, both exhausted from being tense all day, and I fell asleep faster than I expected to, given everything. I woke up at 2:47 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I looked at my phone the second I opened my eyes, some instinct telling me to check it, because I heard, very clearly, a voice. Not a scream, not anything dramatic. Just a low voice somewhere downstairs, saying something I couldn't make out, maybe 2 or 3 words, in a tone that almost sounded conversational, like someone talking to another person in the next room. Marissa was awake too, sitting up already, and she grabbed my arm before I could even say anything, and we both just sat there in the dark listening. It didn't happen again. We stayed like that, both of us upright in bed, not talking, for probably 20 minutes before Marissa finally whispered that we needed to just leave right then at 3 in the morning, and I agreed immediately. We threw our stuff into our bags as fast as we could, left half of Marissa's toiletries behind in the bathroom because neither of us wanted to be the one to go back for them, and we got in the car and drove down that gravel driveway in the dark with the headlights bouncing over ruts and low branches, both of us not saying much until we hit the paved road. We checked into a Hampton Inn near the parkway for the last night of the trip and left the next morning without going back to the cabin at all. Chip, the property manager, refunded us for the final night without much argument once we explained, over the phone this time, everything that had happened. Though I could tell by his tone he thought we were probably just spooked by an old house and some wildlife, and I don't fully blame him for thinking that, because typed out like this, none of it sounds as frightening as it felt at 2:47 in the morning in an unfamiliar house. I looked up the cabin's history a little after we got home, out of the same compulsive need I think most people have after something like this. I couldn't find anything definitive. No news stories, no obvious tragedy tied to the property. At least nothing I could find through a normal search. The listing is still up, still gets decent reviews, mostly about the view and the hot tub. Nothing about strange lights or voices, though I did notice, scrolling through, that 2 reviews from earlier in 2025, months before our stay, mentioned weird noises at night and felt like someone else was in the house, buried among otherwise glowing 5-star reviews, easy to miss if you weren't looking for them the way I was. The detail that still bothers me, the one I've never been able to explain to my own satisfaction, is the voice. I've turned it over so many times. Old houses make noise, pipes groan, wildlife gets into walls, all of that. But a voice with actual inflection, actual rhythm to it, like a sentence, is different from a creak or a scratch. And I've never found a version of "it was just the house settling" that actually accounts for what I heard, clear as anything, at 2:47 in the morning, from an empty room below us in a cabin that Chip swore up and down nobody else had access. Marissa and I still talk about it sometimes, usually late at night, usually half joking because that's easier than the alternative, and neither of us has been back to that part of the Smokies since, even though we both used to love it out there. That's all 3 stories for tonight. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking with me through all of it. I know these ones sat a little heavier than usual, and if you've ever lived somewhere remote or worked a night shift alone, or stayed somewhere that just felt wrong for reasons you couldn't explain, I'd really like to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, even if I can't always reply. If this is your first time here, Consider subscribing and turning on notifications because I put out new true horror stories every week, and a lot of you have told me these are the ones you put on for a long drive or to fall asleep to, which honestly still catches me off guard every time I hear it, but I'm glad they help. A quick reminder, the details in these stories have been changed where needed to protect the privacy of the people who lived through them, but the events themselves are told as close to how they were shared with me as I can manage. If something like this has ever happened to you and you want it told, my email's in the description, and I do read submissions personally. As always, lock your doors, trust that feeling in your gut when something's off, and I'll see you in the next one.